Wasasiyati. Yakecha yuchsatini.
Yake.
Oh, gonna cheese.
Xíxchʼ.
Oh, yake. Wasa.
Yake, gonna cheese. Wa ekua.
Ishwasa khat uti. Jegu ginkir khat kautu wasai. Ya achiat kitin ashkauch Tlingit. With trampoline a kach. At hakautu wakain. Khat kautu wasai. Tlaydihin aya. Ya achunki. Chak. Gosh. Dakun talk shuhichen. At haswu at ya achiat kiin. Yewe. Achuni au khat kautu wasai. Ya wa achiat ki has au saku Tlingit. We Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi das away khat kautu wasai. Ya akiki koa hela awasko. Clinket awsako koa ajoy du Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. Das away sai. Du Xíxchʼ sweaty. So khat kautu wasai means I'm perspiring or I'm hot. And then so when you say you're hot, you don't say you're hot like you would say something else, like yata would be like the water's hot or the coffee's hot or whatever. Kautu wasai is how a person is hot. And it does mean to be perspiring. So a friend of mine, or two friends of mine, they were walking around with my kids, and my kids know Clinket. The boy was just a baby then, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And so the two girls were probably 5 and 3, maybe. And they were walking around, and one of my friends said, "Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi." And the older one knew what it meant, but the younger one didn't know what that word meant, but knows Clinket. So she said to her older sister, "What's sai?" Which is really neat because she isolated the verb root. We've always wondered, like, what's it like when you teach kids like from birth? And her older sister said, "Sweaty." And so it was a great answer. So anyways, anybody else? What's Wasasiyati? Share if you want to. Okay, anybody want to share any sentences? Goodness, cheese. Oh, mute.
First of all, I need to say Gunesh Cheesh to my helpers in the in our earlier what do we call that, study session.
Okay.
Sugu yaji hin hak tin ak kwagut kwat sa kut nak nik gs tayi yes ye jine hut aya at away sanech at sat huns gleka ka le chini nak ka no kuak it kawake ka dus sek yaji akit hidi de wagut sa haksane.
Okay.
Tlachunach yake. Gunnel cheesh. Yakecha. I've also heard kushta nagu for mint.
Did you?
Yeah, and it's really neat because the nak is medicine, but I think there's some instances where it's used to actually like be a repellent, which sometimes I think about it. So like, does the mint keep the kushta away? Because they call mosquito repellent tacha nagu. Or is it like, does it mean that's medicine for a mosquito? I overthink it. And so another one.
It keeps the cuisine away.
Yeah, which is good. Because
I saw it say, when I looked it up, it said it is mint-like.
Oh, okay. Okay, that chani nak means stink medicine. Or just odorous. Like, so tlichan doesn't always mean stink. Although if someone says itlichan, it's usually not a compliment. So, okay. Konach yake gunnel cheesh. Okay. Anybody else want to share your sentences with us or anything?
Yes, kuaha Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Audiganya Khana Aku Yekugen Khasiat.
Yeah, well, talk de yakunahin. Yeah, yak too. We shukwa kahwan. Itchaya ya nachlenukzawe kahwech ka Xíxchʼ the Tlingit yati. Gwal ya sandik ak shuicho a akakakoshi. We kahwech ka Xíxchʼ. Okay. Kachosaku takde yakunahin. Costco yich chokut tliatke. Kachosatin. Sag chata taktud na ati. Ha! Takde yakunahin. Costco oechanakawanik. We were talking about seasons in class the other day, so those are good. Kind of seasonal references. Yées is the fall. Yakunahin is like something is on its way, and then the kuaha is it's already here. So you could say yést kuaha with a T at the end. And you say takde yakunahin, and then it's getting to be winter, like when you start to feel it. Shashaki gaya gwash udutzatin glate yeast glate shashaki gayati. Sometimes you see new snow. There's new snow on top of the mountains. And then I said I knew winter's coming because I went to Costco the other day and I saw gloves and sleds and snow pants. So Costco told me winter's coming. Chanakawani Costco, talk de yakunahin. Yanyanede, get yourself ready. Okay. Anybody got any questions or thoughts that you wanted to ask or share?
What's something I could say when, like, I run into a standoffish bear?
Oh, talking to bears, tone is really important. Even though sometimes in a certain situation you might forget, but you shouldn't yell at them or gesture, sort of anything, nothing that challenges them, because that's a challenge you won't come back from if you're not careful. But also, like they say, at yaune takata de jichtuti nuch. Qunakhoy Xíxchʼ Ohas on Qanins Yehas Outleya. Especially the brown bear, which sometimes we call ancestor or grandparent. I saw Lily White give a talk. So a lot of times before you even go into the woods, there's 3 different ways you can address them kind of spiritually. So you say, Xíxchʼ Kohas is our grandparents. That's how Lily White said it. You can also say, Hutzkwani. So that's talking to the spirits of the bears or the bear people. Hutzyegias is the spirit helpers that are bear. So Hutzkwani is probably pretty common. Xíxchʼ Kohas you might hear as well. You might just say Xíxchʼ, and just like if it's one single bear and you're trying to get its attention. Generally, when we're out in the woods, I don't recommend saying the word hoots, you know. When I teach my kids not to say it when we're out in the woods, because it's sort of like you show it so much respect that once you start saying its name, it's going to be out there be like, oh, someone's calling my name. I better go see what's going on. And so, yeah, it'll pop up. So a lot of times we don't talk about Yatsi Nate is a way you can talk about it. Yatsi Nate means a living thing. Or you could say, you can say that she or he, they are around, or they were around. So you got to talk about them really indirectly, you know. So it's very tempting, I think, to tell bear stories when you're out in the woods, but that's really going against the grain of the way that we used to do things. So one is you don't talk about them when they're not around. But you can address them right before you go into the woods. You could say something like, Hutzkwani, Cha'ade Hanayu, Yineshi Yidegachtu Art, Cha'atchai Sak, Okachai Atkayak Kokachtu Shi, Ashagun, Hastu Atchai Oe Konachoe Hakeyak E, Hatu Naguch Sati. Keshatwash Koa you to Satini. A joy ye in Kakwanik Chade Hanayu. Ha eat the shikon, Xíxchʼ. So basically saying, forgive us. We're going to walk into your house. We're just trying to look for something to eat. Or you could just say what you're doing, whatever you're doing. Walking around, going for a hike. Those are totally fine things. Exploring, you know, they say it on the land. And so we feel so good going out on the land. But then you could say things like, you know, Hashagun atchai, like the food of our ancestors is really good for us. It tastes good. And hatu naguchsati, it's our spiritual medicine. And so it's going out and walking in the woods and being outside. And then you could say things like, we don't want, though, you to satini, to see you. Right? And so that's, you know, this is why they call it kashisikwa. It's a sensitive thing. So you got to have a really respectful, it's a prayer. When I've heard people do it, it's a prayer. So a Clinket prayer, your hands are usually held up, and you got this kind of upper register. Hutzkwani, yeah, and we used to just talk, you know. And like I know if you grew up speaking English, pretty much that was your only language, or if you weren't around the culture, it might feel awkward to just talk out into the air. But that's a really culturally appropriate thing to do. And then to say, you know, we don't want to see you. And so that's why we're saying, please forgive us. And then you thank them. And then if you do see them, it's a pretty quiet tone. Like we had a bear encounter in Haines this summer. And I yelled at it the first time, which was a bad move. I know better. But it was coming for a fish, you know, and then it chased us off and came back several times. And finally, I just talked to it. And you talk pretty calm and kind of straightforward. I remember there was a black bear one time in my yard, and I said, we have commands, so I wouldn't use commands. But I kind of did. I said, maybe just go away. You know. So again, but it's something you got to say really respectfully, and then you could just say, you know, that's a really good thing to say too, because if you come upon it, you don't want to startle that bear, you don't want to challenge it. Usually, if you just sort of say what you're there for, that's a really good way to take care of it. And then I'll put that one in the chat.
Was yay nagu?
Gwash adach nagu.
Was a duck nagu?
So that's like, maybe get out of here. So, yeah, I said it twice, and it just kind of went, and then because it was just sitting there looking at me. I opened the garage door, it was just looking at me, and then it walked away. You know, they can understand it, especially if you say it in Tlingit, and just never insult it, never cuss at it, never call it names, because then that's when the real bad stuff tends to happen. And generally, when you're out in the woods, you know, you kind of make a little bit of noise every now and then. We'd sing, or sometimes, you know, talk and just, you know, Yaduhan, Yaduhan, here we are. Just kind of, you know, if you're going out into the woods, it's good to bring copper. It's good to bring tobacco. Just, you know, these are just some of your backup sort of items in case you run into something that's not a person, which can happen out there. But tobacco is a really good deterrent for a lot of different things. Any other questions?
Yeah. I've got a question. What's the word difference between looking and seeing?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few different ways to talk about it. So we're gonna have to get into the database here.
Because I was thinking about kutits, you know, like.
Yeah, there's a few different ways to say. So we'll start with this one. So this one is, you might have heard it as ʼatánk or ʼatánk, and this is a verb for look, right? So if there's something you want somebody to like take a look at, like look at this thing before it takes off, or just look outside, tell me what the weather is. This is the sort of kind of default way of saying look. And if you're from Cake or you're from Teslin, you'll say qeen for the ending, whereas other places you'll say qeen. And this one is a little bit different than the others in some ways, being that this right here says motion. The reason it says motion is because there's 5 types of Clinket verbs. An act verb is for somebody to do something, often to someone. An event verb is for something to happen, which means there's usually no time when it's sort of in. It's usually like hasn't happened, happened. There's no real in between with those ones. Then there's state verbs for something to be a certain way, strong, stinky, good. And then you have motion verbs, which is for something to move. Then you have position verbs for something to be located somewhere. And the thing to remember about the motion verb is sometimes you're going to hear it as, if we go here, we'll see ʼatánk, and other times we'll hear ʼatánk. And it kind of depends on what pops up before it, right? So for example, if you're going to say, look at it, like at something, like look at this porcupine, ʼxíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ. So I'm going to put this letter T on it. But if I'm going to say, just look outside, I'll say, gande ilqain. Look outside. Tell me like what the weather is. So that's one of them. But this is just like, look, right? And then we have, I don't know if the tease verb is in this set, actually. Hold on. No, it's not. So we'll look at that one in the verb dictionary in a second. So then there's the set of teen verbs, which is to see something or to watch something, right? So this is where you'd say like sitin, or you say khatin, or you'll say shatin. So ishqin would be look, and shatin would be watch it, right? Like for example, if I'm going to tell you keep an eye on my dog for a second, or watch my kids. So it could mean to like care for it, or to kind of babysit or dog sit, to hin chatin, watch the river. You could be kind of guarding it. But it also means, could you just like watch it, like watch this guy, make sure he doesn't run away, or whatever it is. So you've got tain and teen. I'll show you another one up here, just a little bit different, which is and this is to inspect it. So this is like poke your face out at it, literally is kind of what you're saying. So this one you would use to say judge it, take a look at their work, inspect it, check it out, take a close look at it. So that would be right? So you're going to hear, in this case, yautza right? Like when Raven found his nose, they said, he really inspected it. And then he said, that's not bad, which is a funny part of the story. Okay, let me check the chat. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff here. Oh, okay. And then we'll look at one more, and then we'll see. So there's a few, and when it comes to Tlingit, that's kind of often the case. Like there's a few different ways to say the same type of thing. So when we go into the verb dictionary, and maybe we'll just start by looking at the English section. We'll look at L, and we'll go down to look. And so here we're going to see to look at, and we'll see to watch or to gaze at. And we see like to study or to take note of. Like this would especially be like looking at a magazine or a book. And then you have, this one's pretty unusual, to take all your possessions out and to take a look at them. That's pretty unusual. And then you have to keep your eyes open and kind of look for something. A little bit unusual as well. I don't hear that one as much, but that's sort of keeping an eye out for it. Like if you're gonna walk around and look for a certain kind of shell or something like that. And then you have to watch for something. And this is the aqa qakhatis. Like especially like you're, I'm gonna sit here and watch for a moose to come out. That's what this one would be teased. Or to like, I got some binoculars and I'm really looking around for something. Like we gotta go find this person. We think they're on this island, and so you would be teased with binoculars or whatever if you're looking for them. So those are the kind of different ways, right, to look at something. And so there's looking at, then there's seeing, and then they have their own sets of verbs for each of those.
And
Xíxchʼ.
I would like to share one.
Xíxchʼ.
So this was from David Katzig, and it's in one of the Gold Belt Heritage Foundation lesson plans. It says, the ancient teachers would say to their students, ada and again, ada and again. This means to look at, to evaluate, to savor, to think it over. And so it's Raven's way of studying the world. And I really like that. And I think you were showing us that, yeah, which one it was. So thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just put an underline under that G on the verb root.
Okay.
Understand. Yeah, that's that same one. So ada understand would be to look it over. And then ada yanasa would be to really take a close examination of it. So awesome. Xíxchʼ for sharing. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, things you want to share?
Ach, Jawu Dachun Tlingit Yuchadangi.
Xíxchʼ. Twasaku Hasatini. Kahuachi.
Sandi Katske Khuna de Kuchwatin. Audigan Kliyatge. Nichte ya nachgut. Walking Achtuwusagu. Tlingit Aawasháayi. I have a question about this color yellow in a second. Khunachat Gunaye de Yeyati. Kaschane Tlegu. Xíxchʼ.
Okay, Xíxchʼ. Kashchanate, we got one right outside.
My question, I've been trying to learn the color yellow because there's so much yellow right now, and I found this description of yellow, ʼatánk, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is the color of an eagle beak.
Correct. And then when you're using that, just change the ye to yach. So then that's how you do colors. Yachyati. And so all the colors will be yachyati. And so, and yeah, I'll show you folks let me find it. There are a whole bunch of colors in Tlingit. And so there's some different yellows. So let me find there. And I'll put a link to this on our class page tonight. Let's see. So here it is. So this is the work of Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, who worked with a lot of different speakers to gather as many color names as she could. And so what you'll see here on the left is the noun. So every color comes from a noun. And then to say it's that thing, you would say yachyati. And then the preference is usually to say like tuch yachyati yikate. So you'll put a yi on the end and then some noun to say that colored noun. So black dog, tuch yachyati yikate. There was a process where it could become tuch kate, but we don't fully understand it. So, that might be some sort of proper noun type of thing. So the way to do it is just to go with yachyati, and then we'll know. We'll just, as soon as we hear that yachyati, we'll know you're talking about a color. Although yachyati could be like, it is actually similar to that, right? There are ones you might hear in different places more than others. Tuch is what you're going to hear far more than tz'akl. as far as just being black. So it's like charcoal. Llawch is probably what I would say for gray more often. As we go through here, Xíxchʼ, but Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is not how you'd say blue in the interior, because they don't have, well, they're starting to now. So maybe they'll adopt it, but historically there have not been Xíxchʼ in the interior. So they would say Aawasháayi, which is really interesting because Aawasháayi is like, it's green like jade. So it's usually a dark green on the coast, but for some reason there's blue up in the interior. And then Kayani Aawasháayi is what they'll use, especially in Tessin, for green. Nachinte is a really good one to know. This is the mineral that you would use to get that Tlingit bluish green long time ago. It was really hard to get. Well, if you know a place to find it, I think whenever you go to get it, there'd be like big, huge storms. So it's really just interesting. Then when we get into the yellows, and so there's a whole bunch of different colors. If you look at old recordings, like trying to find anybody talking about any color, that's your needle in a haystack. It just doesn't happen. I search a whole bunch of different things. You rarely hear people talk about colors. So it leads you to believe colors were maybe just not that important. But they're important today, right? You want to be color matching, or you're an artist, all kinds of things. You might be talking about colors. You also didn't have a whole lot of favorites, right? And so that's also a concept that's difficult to translate sometimes. You can just say, what do you like, right? Dog pea yellow is a thing. So that'd be a really bright yellow. But I think the most common ones are ʼatánk, which is this little warbler bird, and then Xíxchʼ, which is the eagle beak. So this one would be like maybe a school bus, that kind of orangish kind of a yellow. And then this one would be a brighter type of one. As you go through, Xíxchʼ is more common than Xíxchʼ, although they're kind of related, I think, if you listen to the story. Got too close to the fire and burned its chest, and that's why it turned orange. And then they said it was Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, and it became Xíxchʼ. Xíxchʼ is ochre, so this is also face paint. Let's see. Sakwat is usually brown. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is usually the more common one for red. Tlingit is the sun is cooking, which is kind of cool, like it's setting, I guess. Oh, maybe I froze. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is pretty commonly pink, and then Aawasháayi is pretty commonly purple. And then Gleit Aawasháayi is pretty commonly white. So yeah, those are the colors, and so I'll put a link to this poster so you folks will have it. Really great work put into this to put this together. Back 15 years ago, back in the day. Okay, any other questions, sharing?
Sorry, can I ask one more quick question about, can you show me where you put links at the end of each class?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, let me go back to... Whoops. Hold on. It didn't work for some reason. Can I try it again? There it is. Okay. So you can go to clinketlanguage.com. And then under Learning Clinket, you go to Intermediate Clinket. And then you scroll down, and there's basically a whole bunch of links up here for most of the things we'll be using for every class. This is the handbook that we're going to be sort of, like if you wanted to read all the text about how those possessive suffixes work, it's in here. There's this reference guide. We'll talk about this reference guide today, how it could be used. And then books by the Dowenhowers, notes by Jeff Lear, and a handbook by James Crippen. And then you go down, here's our Zoom link. If you ever sort of lose track of the link to join our class. This is a folder that has just tons of stuff. Like everything I could find on Tlingit, I put into this folder. And then here's a couple other sort of things, this big spreadsheet of nouns from Jeff Lear. And then you get down here and then you get into like the actual classes. So here's the class from October 8th. Here's the link to watch the class. Here's the text file from the chat. Although if anybody sends me a private message, I just kind of delete their name from it because I figured they said private, so whatever. And then here's any of the handouts from the class. So usually if we talk about something or reference it, whenever class is done, usually at night after put the kids to bed, then I'll start uploading this stuff so that it's there.
Xíxchʼ.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I thought it'd be good to, so we've got a couple things. We got to finish our frog woman story. I guess it's the frog who married a woman. And then we're almost done with that. Then we have our chapter 7 of the Beginning Clinket workbook, looking at object pronouns. Then we have direction and location type of stuff. But I thought it'd be good to just listen to a speaker for a bit. So we're gonna listen to Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, Cyril George. He used to come and visit our classes now and then, and he would come to the university and speak during certain events and respond to certain events. He's a really great speaker. He's from Angoon. His people come from this place called Xíxchʼ. They're Xíxchʼ, so they're the Basket Bay people. They migrated to Angoon. And he grew up with storytellers like Bob Zuboff, ʼatánk. And so he was a really fantastic speaker and storyteller. He was really good at telling jokes. Like you'd invite him places and stand up, this very revered Clinket elder, and then he'd start talking and you'd start thinking, is this a joke? Yeah, because you could just sort of tell him just like, there's this, when you start using present tense verbs, it's usually a joke, right? So you'd say, I saw this guy the other day, and you know, but then you'd say like, this guy walks into a bar, right? And so that's kind of a classic type of thing. And he was very knowledgeable. He was a clan leader for the Xíxchʼ. They also are part of the Daishitan now. And we asked him if he would be into just recording some stories. So we set it up, we being Kathy Colkhorst Ruddy, Steutin is her Clinket name, and Ishmael Hope, his Clinket name is Kagwask. And so we got together at Sealaska Heritage Institute. This was before their new building was put up. And so we recorded him, and he really couldn't hear anything at the time. So anything that we wanted to tell him, we'd have to write down. And so Kathy was really excellent about getting him there and writing down our ideas, you know, because we asked him to tell us some stories. And He was 92, I think, at the time, and said nobody had asked him to have stories recorded, according to him. So we were really happy that we were able to do that. So we got a series of stories, and what you'll find is these stories that sometimes they're told differently, and that's totally fine, right? There's variety in our culture. There's variety in our stories. And so in between some of the stories, Xíxchʼ had the idea of asking him, what do learners of Tlingit need to hear to stay encouraged and to help them? And this is what he said. So we'll take a look. I gotta make sure to share the sound. Back to Chrome. Go here.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ Xíxchʼ 1922 Xíxchʼ Hudbekanarik Xíxchʼ Xáatkʼ Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Xáatkʼ Xáatkʼ ʼatánk Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Xáatkʼ ʼatánk Xíxchʼ Clinket 1922 Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Xáatkʼ ʼatánk Yítataya Yíajoan Xalqinen Yées Sháatkʼ Tsuxatwa Kintaqenan Xas'ich Yíajoa Xalqina Akayatiya Nayat Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Waitixeqatutino Xíxchʼ Hachidach Koxlahash Xáatkʼ Yíajoa Xalqina Axtachqanqiyan Axyatkʼ Yítato Axtuoyati Teislasheqqutkek Axtuoqik Xáatkʼ Xíxchʼ Yíatlatouag Xatsa Axua Tlinket hasta Xíxchʼ Yías Altua Axaqaqi Oik Qati Chatseq Qaqasti Clinket
Any thoughts, reactions? Couple typos in there. It should be ʼatánk, not ʼatánk.
Chunachach dusachwa achi. Gonna cheese.
Well. Do ichaya sachlaha. Ya chunachach tuasagu do inuchach detani. Ya awe. Wasa tullaan. Chunachach tullaan. Adadea yuchach detanen. Gash gashni yat ayach. Kledehi naya an goon. Wichakut ku'u. Atlein yak ayah. Gwashi ani de haswu kuch. Cha yudu asago at. Gwash adawut. Has ayah has awati. Ye awe ye wuhi chak. Guch has tituasagu. Has outle yechi. We ku'utin. Achawait lakat ye de aya haslu guch. Gwash ke hasu ichtsu. A kawachit shan aya when qanins adawut. Kutlagao. Klei nach aya we ka. Adachwu shich. Kesh ke has akwashat. Achewuti. Aka away. Awa ach du yit. Achi. Kawakach away du yit. Du yit chande wushich. Yewe to de tan. Ach tu was a gugu chatzati. Ach yit tin. Keshach tuwa ashku. Ach yit ach jinakasa washati. Ye awe kusachan. Kanachawe hatu yeti. One qanins acho awe tlet khaye aseo qaqnachawe yitullakan. Like Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi datyachsawe Tlingit qusti. Hashkashni ki tin aya qeqa gachtusaku datyachsawe hachagudach ayi. One qanins lidzi haqusti. Qanachawe qoa wush tudzachan. Ya haqusti tin. So he told us another one, like he would talk about the ways that Tlingits care for each other. And I really hold on to those things because sometimes things get tough. You get some rough scoldings, you know, in this culture and in our language. That's part of the territory, but sometimes it's also part of the healing journey, is someone's got to take the lickings to make it easier for future generations. And that doesn't mean you should go be mean to people, right? Just, at some point, it's got to turn a corner. But while we're turning the corner, we go back to these stories. So he said one time a village got raided. You know, if there's a whole bunch of canoes, if there's more than one canoe, you call it cha, which could be a pod of killer whales or a war party. That's how we just knew things to be on the coast. We're like, hey, here comes a boat. Maybe they want to trade. Oh, here comes 5 boats. War, right? It's like it was coming. So these people were coming to take people and make them into slaves. And so it was scary times. Everybody's running out of the village and there's probably screaming and stuff going on. And this guy, he made it to safety. He was like, oh, they're not going to get me. And so he was safe. He made it. But then he heard the cries of his son. So he just went busting down there to be taken slave, because he'd rather be a slave with his son than have his son taken from him. And so he would use that as examples of the ways that we care for each other. And some people talk about us like we're just so mean. You know, the other summer I was teaching in Sitka, and someone said, she probably had dementia, so maybe she didn't have a good filter, but she said, I didn't think Clinkets laughed. I said, we laugh all the time, but people were stealing our stuff and it's not very funny, but we're still telling jokes to each other. So, you know, just trying to think about this stuff and continually putting into context about why they said these things. If you go to the words of those people, you'll see like a proper way to live according to what our language shows us. And we could be tough. We could be tough on each other. Some people bring that up a lot. And we had pretty hard lines in the ways that we did things, but we also were caring people. And I think we should hold on to that, and we should use that as a source of inspiration for the type of work that we're doing. Any other thoughts?
Who yana Cajun so chalta kada de yakohe go kutsati yaksha.
There's a spirit in everything. And so that's a really good starting point for a lot of the stories, because, you know, you could just, if you think about it, just throwing a rock could put things out of, you know, it's going to spin out of control. Or going back to these stories, like laughing at a whole bunch of stories where, you know, there's one where these little boys, they were laughing at this bird. And that bird came and plucked everybody's eyes out when they slept, you know. And so, like, there's a back end to these things, coming back to these concepts of shakas and jinnaha, like the things you're not supposed to do. But then if we just stick to what we're supposed to do, then the good things keep coming, supposedly. Like, you know, that's what we're told, so that's what we do. That's what I believe. Okay. Xíxchʼ. Okay, we only got a few more lines left in our story. Maybe we'll get to those lines, and then we'll take our break, and then we'll see what folks want to do when we come back from break. And that video's there. The other videos are up on YouTube, so you can watch them. Some of them have the subtitle button, so you can watch the English and Tlingit. I got to fix a couple things on that one still. It's always stuff to fix. Okay, so this is where we left off. They just put the husband carefully back in the water. We had a nice tender moment here. And then I think we move on. Anybody want to read this one for us?
I'll read it.
Xíxchʼ.
Niste has Jiwatan.
Okay. Niste has Jiwatan. Anything you recognize in there?
Niste and Tan.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, Niste is going home. Neish on its own could be going inside of a building. But you'll know if there's day or dach or a t on there, then it's just the noun type. Otherwise, it's the directional type, right? Like if you say neichke, you should be inside if you're saying that, right? Which is come in. But that's a different but related neich. And so neichte, towards home, has ajiwatan. So this ajiwatan is to like take someone by the hand and lead them somewhere. There is an important term. You could say, instead of neichte, if you change it to atut, two different words, and then tut, that means to adopt somebody into a clan. So you could say atut haschat jiwatan. Yeah, whoever, like, and you name a clan, right? And that's how you bring someone into the clan. And so that's a phrase that people can use if they want to say they were adopted by a clan. And then that's, you know, it's a good one to know. But that's what the verb means. It's like they led me into it. is basically what it literally translates to. Can I get another reader?
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ.
Okay. Xíxchʼ. And what do you recognize in there?
It seems to me that it's frog, you, and often we say yakatangi, but it's related. So is that it's the frog language?
Okay, yeah. So ʼatánk and ʼatangi, right? So I think I think I'm remembering this, right? I had a student and we studied for years. And then they finally said, you kept saying ʼatangi and I didn't know what it meant. And I felt like I should have. And so like ʼatangi means like usually a language, but it's a noun that comes from a verb. So this is the verb form. ʼatánk means they are speaking. Like right now, they are speaking. Right, and so there's a command form, ʼatán. It means speak. So, and then also like we did the colors. So here's that yach thing that we do for the colors.
Right.
Yach on its own means like it, like similar, right? It's like a, if you ever want to use a simile in Tlingit, this is a great way to use a simile, right? So in this case, Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. They're talking like a frog. And so it's pretty unusual, right? So they're literally like, they would be going like, rah, rah, or whatever kind of sounds a frog, like ribbit. But I never heard a frog say ribbit my whole life. Gua here. And then this us is only or just. Then there's awe, which is a bit of a pause. Then all together, it's a short time. So that it's sort of kind of what that would mean, like, or it's short, like literally something is short. And so what you're going to find in Clinket is there's a few different things. You talk about things being big or long or short. You could sort of say like big, not big, little. And so usually there's an opposite for one of those ones. And so this is the opposite for saying it's not long. And it could refer to time, right? So so what it's telling you here is like it wasn't for very long, but for a little while she could only speak like a frog.
Is that watt any relation to the watt of measuring by your arms?
I don't think so. It's closer related to yacht, to something to be long. Okay. Can somebody read this one?
Knach away de walked ka kaudua duch.
It's Xíxchʼ. And what do you recognize? Oh, wait, let me read it. Knach away de walked ka kaudua duch. And what do you recognize in there?
Knach away de walk.
Okay. It's Xíxchʼ. And so this is a metaphor, even though it's translated quite literally. It's really like she was all messed up. She was all confused. She was all, and this is super, because there's ways to say confused, but this is just like saying, boy, this is because, like, let's say in one of these stories, like you go and the frog people take you and you're with them for maybe a year, even though maybe it only seems like a short time. When they bring you back, which, you know, usually in these stories, it takes like some big thing that happens to bring you back, or maybe they're just like, okay, it's time for you to go home. Then they'll just take you home, right? It depends. But usually there's these points in these stories that are pretty common where it's like, boy, they were all messed up. And so qunach is really, there's that awe again, duwaq, her eyes. Then this T is like saying at her eyes. Ka kauduwaduch, it was tied in knots. So this is the verb for tying a knot. Tying your shoes, tying whatever, you're just tying a knot onto something. And then there's du in there, which is like somebody did it. It's like, you know, somebody tied it up on her eyes. Okay. Another reader.
Satguyega Chush Trenach ʼatánk Nik.
Okay. Satguyega Chush Trenach ʼatánk Nik. And what do you recognize in there?
Satguyega, I think you said it the other day, finally. And then I recognize Trenach ʼatánk. Like speak.
Yeah, what?
Her language.
Yeah, what? Xíxchʼ. Yeah, so Satguyega is finally, but I don't know if every community says it the same way. I know in the interior they say dehua, and it's the same type of thing, but it's sort of like finally, you know, and so Satguyega. But I was at a gathering of elders, and they were just sort of, it was such a neat meeting at Gold Belt Heritage Foundation, and they were just talking about words that they don't hear anymore. And somebody brought this one up. I think it was Fred White who brought this one up. And they all started talking about it. And we were looking at Jeff Lear's notes, and then we're talking about it. And they really like to say, like, at long last, as what they kind of were equating it to in English. And so, Einach is through the mouth of something. And so this could be, so you could talk about, this could refer to speaking in a specific language. Like you could say, they spoke in Haida, right? And so it could be talking about a language. But once you have chush in there, chush is the self, right? And so chush would be her own language, right? Because she's Tlingit, so she speaks Tlingit. And so ʼatánk Nik. And this is for some of the cake people, they'll say Nik, where other people might say Nooch or Neech. There's a few different ways to say this, but this is like saying all the time. So finally, she was speaking like herself, is basically how I would be looking at that. But, you know, speaking her own language, speaking Clinket, you know, there's different ways to interpret that. But chush in this case, it's a little unusual, but since the last sentence was talking about she's talking like a frog, finally she starts talking like herself. Another reader.
Ya do ane kwan ku ich aflitiu, aflitiu. Ya Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ. Now, what do you recognize in there?
Ya do ane kwan ku. It's like I'd say the part about the frog people itself. I recognize. Kashiki. That's the one that I get I'm kind of confused with. And that should be speaking too as well, right? Or is that Ashlitiu?
Yeah, well, so
it's like Achi.
Achi, and then Achi, so you could pluralize that, which would be songs.
Oh, it's all it is plural, and she was.
Yeah, but there is
songs.
Something else going on with that one. So just a walkthrough from the start. Yeah, so her village in this case, and then we're seeing Kwan Ku'u. And the reason why we're, Du'anya Ku'u is what would be common, like the people of her village. But the reason the Kwan is popping up here is because we're going back, and she's been going back and forth between these frog people and her people. So sometimes that just pops up to be like, oh, it was the humans, or the people. But this would be another way you could use this Kwan to reference, like, we were talking to the people of Chilkat, not just anybody, but the people who are historically, ancestrally from that place. So if I said Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, that means not just everybody who lives in Klukwan, but those people who are ancestrally from there, which is sometimes we differentiate those things in terms of land ownership, privileges, who should be able to speak, all that stuff factors in.
So would ku'u be like the plural of ku'a?
No, ku'u is just people. It's related to a verb like kuya'u, to reside somewhere. But it's a good way to say, like, Kwan is also people, but it's, again, like when you say Huttida Kwan, you're talking about those people from Angoon who have this historical right to the land and to At'u and to things there. If I moved to Angoon, I could become part of the community, but I couldn't really become part of the Huttida Kwan. I would be Xíxchʼ Kwan. And so same with living here, right? And so these are some things, but ku'u could be everybody. Like you can say Angoon ku'u, all the people who are living in Angoon. So this is the difference between Kwan and ku'u, which is good to know, right? Because you could have a ku'u anywhere. There could be a ku'u on this ku'u, people living on the moon. Bring it on, right? And so the ku'u comes from the verb kuwa'u, to reside somewhere. And this is how you can, if you're talking about yourself, you could talk about where you're from, where you're born, where you grew up, where you live right now, and also where you are. So you could say, let's say there was some conference going on in Seattle and I was there. I could say, Seattle, Juneau, but I live in Juneau, right? So that's where the ku'u comes from. You also you'll hear it to refer to generation sometimes. Yées ku'u would be the new generation. Walter Sobolov used to talk about that. So he'd say like Yées ku'u, so that the young generation can hear it. I'm going to speak. Then we have Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, which is cake dialect. How would I say this outside of cake?
Is that what it is?
Aawasháayi, I think that's what I heard. It was kind of soft. Aawasháayi. So tu is counting, teaching, reading, studying. Any of those is tu. And if you're in cake, it's tiu. So Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi taught it to them. And then Xíxchʼ, the frog. And then Achi is a song. Achiri would be songs belonging to someone. But this is a mouth. And this is how you would talk about, like, if somebody composed a song, like if I might say, Kiza Chashi, this is the song that Kizam made. And that's one way you could say it. And the ch just pops up there, almost like it's like a song right from their mouth kind of a thing. So when you combine those, Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, what that's saying is like she taught them like Clinket songs that the frogs taught her when she was living with them. And this is part of our stories as well. It's like, oh yeah, this song comes from this instance, and it was taught to them by what the otters or whatever it was. They came back with a song, and that was something that would happen in these stories. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 6 sentences left, but we better take our break. Then we'll see. I thought we'd finish the story. We'll see. I think we still can. But let's take 5, and then we'll kick it back up again. Okay. Can get you a name. Should we get to the end of this? Okay. Somebody read.
Ade has kudziti ye Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Adat has duin akawanik.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ Adat has duin akawanik. What do you recognize in there?
The Xíxchʼ again, no frog people.
Mm-hmm.
I always say kudziti ye. I keep forgetting what it means. Adat has to duin akawanik. I feel like that's again, like they I don't have it.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, kudziti is to exist. But there's two different forms. There's one where it's just like existing, but then there's one that's like living, right? So basically, we're going to start talking a little bit about like objects and subjects. Like the object is the one the verb happens to, the subject is the one that does the verb. And so, for example, we heard Cyril today say kudziti. So you could say kudziti, like I was born. But you can also say kudziti, which is also I was born, but it's sort of like I came into the world, as opposed to like I just was born. So that there is a little bit of a difference there. So you could say kudziti, I exist, and you could say kudziti, I'm living. So the differences between these are pretty significant, because you can use one to say like live a good life. Like there's a command form for it, right? And this one, so you have kudziti is how they exist. And once you put ade and ye on either side of that verb, you're talking about the way that verb happens. Ade has kudziti ye, the way they exist, the way they live. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, the frog people. Adat, this one has three parts. Adat has duin akawanik. Adat is about it, and so this is what the it is. So Clinket likes to tell you stuff, then refer back to it by using an it type of a pronoun. Has duin, to them, akawanik, she told it. Right, and so this, if you sort of ignore this top part, this is you can use this to say, told them about Raven. Yeshdat hastu'ina kawanik. Told them about our history. Hashagun hashagun dat hastu'ina kawanik. So this verb is talking about like telling information, but it can also be used sometimes to be like to tattle on somebody. Like if, I don't know, if we're kids and I saw you do something, ooh, I'm gonna tell on you, right? So that's what's going on in this sentence. We're almost to the end. Somebody read this.
Astuin kunach dak has akawani. Tlingit yuk atangi has aya we Xíxchʼ.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi kunach dak has akawanik. Clinket yuk atangi has we Xíxchʼ. And what do you recognize in there?
Hastuin hasakawanik is they told about it to them. Kunach dak. Kunach looks like kunach, and dak reminds me of like out in the open. And then Tlingit Yucatangi is language, Tlingit language. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. They heard him, the frogs.
Okay. Yeah, so hastu'in, there it is again, to them. So you could say ach'in, to me, i'in, to you, ha'in, to us. And then this kunach dak, when it's paired together in front of this akawanik verb, it goes from telling someone information to explaining something to them. That's all it does. It's just sort of this combination. Once you put those in front of it, it's sort of like, let me explain to you how to put this together. Let me explain where our clan comes from. Let me, you know. And then, yeah, Clinket yuchatangi, Clinket language. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. So this verb, ach, is to hear something, or to listen, or to make a sound, or to play an instrument. It could be any of those things, or to echo. But when you put the ch in front of it, that means to understand. So Aawasháayi. So she explained to them that the frogs can understand the Tlingit language. And this is something also that is a Tlingit concept. They'll say, everything that's on our land understands Tlingit. Porcupine, deer, bear, they understand it. And this is something as well that is rejected by a lot of Tlingit and Detani. Like a lot of colonial thinking just shuts this down. But I've seen it. I've encountered it. I've heard about it. I talk to porcupines all the time. They always do that. And they listen to me when I'm speaking Clinket. It's really fun. So I'm 4 left. You better hurry up and read if you haven't read yet.
Tlingit Kwak has Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi has ye guaxanic.
Xíxchʼ has ye Aawasháayi has ye guaxanic. What do you anything you recognize? This one, it's a pretty complicated sentence.
No, just has. They. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, has. So has is in there. So this first one, this tlich. So we may have heard like tlech or hesh or klech or tish. Those are all ways to say not. And so they'll usually put the verb into a negative form. So like not good, not this, not, not there. And then, but when we say tlich, L, high tone IL, and we just always gotta remember that there's no voiced L. That's something we'll just keep working on. But this tlich, when it pops up before a verb, it means don't do the verb. So usually what we should expect is there's going to be the verb and then this underlying K. So tlich and this combined to be don't do it. Xíxchʼ, don't eat it. Whereas cha is that verb root for eating. And then we have this kwak, which is a little bit complicated. It means like to make a mistake. And sometimes that mistake is sort of like a little error, but a lot of times when you're using this thing before a verb, it's actually a bigger kind of a big mistake, right? Like if you're at a ku'ik and somebody makes a really big error talking, like, they say that it's their thing, but it's actually someone else's thing, or, something. So there's some kind of big mistake that usually when this pops up, that's something that needs to be fixed, right? It's sort of like the clan is going to have to stand up now and say, a little while ago, something happened and we need to fix this thing. And so in this case, we have the verb here you might recognize in the form ayosaka. And so this is how the verb could start to really change. So this combines as a command, or what we call like the prohibitive. Don't say a mistake to them. Don't say the wrong thing, right? And in particular, they're talking about insulting these animals or laughing at them. But in this case, don't say the wrong thing to them. And then Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is sort of like, lest they come get you, right? And so this is another thing we see a lot in Clinket stories, like, don't go messing with those animals, they're gonna come take you. They'll come take you. And this is what we say to our kids all the time. I say to my kids, like, don't you laugh at that. It's gonna come get you in the nighttime, which is like classic Clinket teaching, right? Like, and so you want them to be scared so that they don't disrupt that universe. Okay, 3 more. Anybody not read yet? My thing shows 18 people. I don't know if I've heard 18 voices yet. Well, you get 7.
Read it. Ja, du Clinket aan de dag ku'u, du eet has wusiach, ja atu, you kaudzegit, ja kusti.
Okay. Ja, du Tlingit aan die dag ku'u, du eet has wusiach, ja atu, you kaudzegit, ja kusti. And anything you recognize in there?
Ja, du Clinket aan de dag ku'u, it's like her Clinket people or something like that. Let's see, Hus, they, Kusti, like, well, sort of like Kusti. So yeah, not a whole lot.
Okay, no, that was good. Okay. So yeah, so her village, and then you have Dach, Clinket ani Dach ku'u, the people from that village, which I'm not going to do it. The village people, anyways. So the people from her village, and then what we see here, so looking at this verb, ach, that verb root to hear or to make a sound. There's so many verbs that can just come out of that one verb root. So you can have awa'ach, they heard a sound. You can have duwa'ach, it made a sound. You could have awsha'ach, they played an instrument. You could have awsa'ach, they listened for it. You can have chaya'ach, they understand it. So you have what's the other one? Keinas'ach, it's sounding off. Kluchte keinas'ach, it's echoing back. All those things are using the same verb root. So in this case, when you have somebody's mouth to their mouth, right? This is what the ch is doing, and then the t. So we see cheinach, cheidach, cheide, chait. You're seeing all of these things in terms of the mouth, and for different sort of things. Like you could say, du chait te, feed them. And you can say, du cheidach awechwa'ach, I heard it from their mouth. And in this case, du chait has wuse'ach. So when the S pops up in this classifier, now they're listening. They listen to her, right? So this is what it's saying, like the people of the village, of her village, listened to her, right? Ya atu yu kaudzegit. So this one's a little more complicated, like atu is inside of it. Yu kaudzegit is like something happened. Ya kuste in this life, right? Kuste is life. So basically, when you put it all together, the people of the village listened to what happened to her. Like, like there was this big thing that happened and she's sort of talking about it. Second to last one.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées. And what do you recognize in there?
Just Xíxchʼ.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, so ya is this, and then Xíxchʼ is the frog. Aawasháayi is the image of something. It's got a lot of different meanings. It could mean a picture of something, the image, the drawing. It could be a reflection, a shadow. It could be a ghost in some cases. Aawasháayi is a ghost in some of the Raven stories. But so this is how you could say like what your clan claims, right? So we could say, or other people could say, Kit Yahayi Ayabutuahin. We claim the image of the killer whale. And so the reason you're using Yahayi is because it's being transformed into something. It's a reproduction of it. It's a, in this case, it would be form line. And then Uahain is to claim. So this is another good verb to use in terms of like, we claim that river, we claim this image, we claim this story. And so when it comes to the at'u, this is also is utilized, right, in terms of what we use. And you can also say wutudahin, we share it, right? So it could change in sort of that way. Okay, Hujiayi, last one. Who wants it?
I'll go.
Xíxchʼ.
Adach awe wudud zaku atya awune has dujich du tia we Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi.
Xíxchʼ. Adach awe wudud zaku atya awune has dujich du tia we Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. And what do you recognize in there?
Adach is basically from something aware, that specific thing. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is from the Frog People. Which way?
Okay, Xíxchʼ. Yeah, so in the context of like stories, when you say adach awe, that's a really nice way to transition and say, from this thing, and then you're going to talk, it's like tying a couple of concepts together, right? Like these are really great for clan stories or the reasons why things are a certain way. So there's a number of ways to transition in stories, like with aqa awe, and then adach awe, from that, and then achawe, because of that. So these are just really neat devices to learn how to use. Wananisawe is another one you're going to hear, like at some point. So these are how we do sort of, you got to do narrative jumps when you're telling stories, because you're not going to tell every single thing that happens. And sometimes those jumps are going to be like sometime later, or after a while, or we're just going to jump ahead to this other important thing that's going on, or since that thing happened, this other thing is going to happen. Wududzaku is, you might know this verb from ausaku or chwasaku, but in this form, it means it is known. It's a known thing. People know it. So this is getting into sort of these bigger kind of concepts, like it's common knowledge maybe, or something like that. So from that, it is known. Atya awune is the noun from a verb for respect. Atya awune is respect. Hasdujich dutiyi, people give it to them. And so this is, again, the frogs, right? So because of that, it is known. People give respect to the frogs. Okay, that's the story. I really like to go through these and just look at whole language, and it supplements the things that we do in terms of learning smaller chunks of things, because we'll do some lessons. Then if you go back and look at these stories, you'll start finding these things that we're learning about, right? So we're going to learn about direction and location things. We're going to learn about object pronouns. And when you start learning object pronouns, you'll go back in and you'll see this ye is y'all. It's going to happen to y'all. Nobody's going to come get, no animals are coming to get you though. I'm just using this as an example. Okay. You okay? Thoughts or questions? Everybody okay? Okay. So let's close tonight by taking a look at this chapter 7, Aawasháayi Yées. So this one is going to be in the second edition. Well, it is in the second edition that's going to come out, but it's not in the first edition. So one of the things that I wanted to do is put something in there that looks specifically at object pronouns. So object pronouns are the ones that the verb happens to. Usually, there are some cases where you use an object pronoun to say who's doing it, but basically an object means the one the verb happens to. And so we're going to see how that works in Tlingit. And we're going to also talk about the order of things. A couple times this semester we've talked about naq and how that relates to our language, and naq eqi. It's like a sentence is composed of these octopus tentacles. And this idea comes from the way they teach Hawaiian, because sometimes those tentacles can just kind of move around. So sometimes you can shift some things around. But in Tlingit, what you'll find is sometimes the language is a little bit resistant to those things. Sort of like in English, you're supposed to go subject, verb, object, right? She laughed at the frog, or I ate a sandwich, right? So you can move that around, but you can tell that the language has to shift a little bit, because you can't really say sandwich I ate. It sounds a little off, right? Or ate sandwich I. That's just getting, it starts to get hard to really understand what's going on. But you can start to sort of maneuver the language. You say, it was a sandwich I ate. But now you're trying to be fancy. It's like, what are you trying to do? Fancy, right? So you're going to find some of this stuff with Tlingit as well, where there's a way that the word order tends to like to go. And we're going to talk about these things: objects, subjects. Who's doing it? Who is it happening to? Right? And so, and you'll find this stuff, right? And so sometimes these conversations get a little bit uncomfortable, because we start talking about grammar, start talking about, you know, this is the who, the whom type of conversation that some people don't want to have. So let's start by looking at a quote from one of our elders. This was Chukati. She said, Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ. It blew my mind when she said it. You know, I was like, what? It's just amazing. So a couple different things. Xíxchʼ is my father. Yi is an adjective to say like he used to be my father. That's how she says it. That's how she said it. And that just tells us that her father passed away, right? And not everybody does that. There's very few speakers I've heard refer to their relatives like that. Yamsakayan. So she's from Teslin. So Yausakayan is how other people from the coast might say. So this is a yausaka verb that starts popping up. It means to say a certain thing to somebody. Yausakayan. He used to say it to us. Then you're going to get some kind of quotation, right? Maybe I should put quotation marks in there. Ayik in it, especially in a boat or a car, a tree. Wuddishkatli yak. That's a really cool like metaphor. I translate this as a boat full of silence. And so you might have heard this verb in this form, Xíxchʼ, which is not always a nice thing to say. Someone came to visit my class one time and I said that to a student, and later this person who was an elder, they said, you really shouldn't say that to your students. It's like saying, shut up, so just be careful. But yeah, we were teasing, right? So Xíxchʼ is silence yourself. But in the right, someone else explained it to me before though. They said, when you say Xíxchʼ to someone, it depends on the context. If you're saying it to your kids, you might be telling them literally like, shut up, somebody's talking, right? And so sometimes you need to give them the heavy command. But other times it could be like, settle down. You're being too hard on yourself. You're kind of maybe freaking out a little bit. So it's not always a context of, shut it. And then in this case, it's describing what this boat is. Klakde is quickly. Or I guess kind of always, I don't know. Always quickly goes towards the waterfall. That was wild. That's a fun sentence for me. Okay. So here's our model dialogue. Anybody want to practice this? And we want to be person A, and then someone else be person B.
I'll be person A.
Xíxchʼ A.
Hut.
Can Xíxchʼ B. Gook.
Wa'ekwa.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ.
Eshwasa khat'uti. Wa'edes.
Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées Sháatkʼ.
Iku aya kwan.
Xíxchʼ.
Xíxchʼ. Any other group, any other pair want to try it? One more pair maybe want to try it? Just for good practice. Okay, 2 more people have to try it then.
I was gonna volunteer.
Yay, gonna choose. Be A or B?
I'll be A, I guess.
Okay, gonna choose. I need a B.
B.
All right, good.
Wa'ekwa.
Hataya Yesu. Wasayati.
Eshwasa khat'ute. Wa'edes.
Hat Kuripat. Hesh Kadain Kwata.
Iku aya kwan.
Okay. So what I think we'll try Thursday is we'll just grab a couple of these dialogues. There's one at pretty much at the beginning of every chapter. And we're going to work in breakout groups and just sort of practice them. And we've done it before. I don't know if we'll go full on. We've done this before where we had sort of a bad acting contest just to sort of make it interesting. And the reason we did that is because an elder came in and was listening to us. And he started he got a little fired up. And he said, "You're not robots. You got to use your emotion." And so we translated that into a bad acting contest just to have some fun with it, because sometimes you got to have fun with it because it's challenging and sometimes it gets a little dry. So that's what we'll do on Thursdays. We'll maybe do this one and then maybe we'll pick 2. I don't know, I'll see which ones that we want to do. But going through, wa'ekwa, is that you? Again, that's kind of a silly way to greet somebody. You usually know who they are. You could use that as, like a legitimate question. Like, is that you? Because if you're not sure. But, and then Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi Yées is kind of being silly. Like, yeah, I'm still me. Right? Which is sometimes a fun answer if someone says that. Aawasháayi is a pretty straightforward way to say how you be, how you doing. I'm okay. And again, coming back to that phrase, this could also mean I'm not hurt. So like if we're all hiking and you had an accident and tumbled down a little hill and we're all kind of worried, you might say, I'm okay. I'm okay. And we could ask you a question too. Are you okay? Wa'e days. Not every community uses this. Some use wa'eqo'a, but wa'e days could mean it's your turn, right? Or it could mean kind of end you. Depends on the context. Someone asks you a question, and if you said wa'e days, you're asking that same question right back to them, just like wa'eqo'a. But if we're playing a game, if we're playing cards, we're gambling, and it's your turn. I say, wait, days, Gook, it's your turn, go. There was a semester where I banished the phrase chat with the chet, because like whenever we did just wasa'iyati, people just kept saying chat with the chet. And so I said, it's not allowed. But I'm not saying that now. I'm being relaxed. You could be tired. It's fine. I will say one time we were practicing some stuff and somebody said chet with the chet. There was an elder there and he said, why don't you just say it like it really is? Uchtaka, which is I'm lazy. So we took the lesson, and so just be cautious. But you can still be tired. I'm not saying you can't be tired, but we got some work to do. Heshkedain chota. That's a negative form. So chota or chota. Sorry. If you add another a in there, that's I slept. And if you said kedain chota with two a's right there, I slept well. But when you put the hesh in front of it, or klesh or tish, that means not. Did not sleep well. So this kedain, when you say klesh kedain, not well. Klesh kedain yehas awasne. They didn't do a good job. Right? And so they, again, just sort of learning more ways to change the language, use it in more dynamic ways. And have strength and courage. Okay. And that's a nice teacher who says that one. When you say instead of itzaka, you're lazy. Okay. So let's just start looking at how verbs start changing, right? So one part of learning a language and learning Clinket is learning these different types of things. What's this type of thing? That's a noun. It's the name of something. What's this type of thing? It's an adjective. It messes around with that noun. What's this type of thing? It's one of these directional things. It's where it is, where it's going. And then one of the biggest things in Tlingit is the verb. The verb goes through lots of changes. Most of them are totally predictable, but you got to sort of internalize a whole bunch of mechanics. And so this is where we start looking at things. So let me try and zoom in a bit. So, for example, here's a good Juno verb. Here's a good Southeast verb. So if you want to say it's raining right now, you could, and this is more like it's starting to rain, it just started to rain type of thing. You could say, Siu dak nastan. Siu dak nastan. You see the N pop up on there? That ton is nice and short, it's short and hot. You gotta watch those vowels. And then to say it was raining, or this is also still, it's raining right now. So this is where, again, Tlingit doesn't change for time. It changes for event. And this is just something we gotta keep thinking about. So you could also say, Siu dak husatan. Siu dak husatan. Again, that is a short, high vowel. You got to watch those. So you're not saying ton, saying ton. But here it is, long and low. This is something that's going to happen and you're going to pay attention to. Now, when you say it wasn't raining or it isn't raining, Kelsiu dak wustan. Kelsiu dak wustan. So that vowel fell out of the classifier. That tun went to tan. Kesh is the thing that did it. It pushes that verb. It says, you got to change now, verb, because you're not. Okay? And then let's look at like it's going to rain. Siu dak guchsatan. Siu dak guchsatan. It's going to rain. So now this guchsa popped up in front of it. And then tan, it's long and high. And the next one, it's not going to rain. It's going to be long and low. Everything else is the same. Siu, dak, guchsa, tan. Kesh siu dak guchsa tan. Kesh siu dak guchsa tan. Oops, that says tor. I don't know why it says that. Typomania. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. The goal here is just to sort of say, hey, these things change. We're going to start looking at them, and at this point, notice that they change. There's going to come a point where I'm going to get you to predict all of these verbs so that you'll be able to move them. This is a big part of going from a beginner to an intermediate, is saying, this happened, this used to happen, it's happening, it's not happening, it will, and doing all that stuff. And it takes quite a few mechanics, and some of you are really close, or you already know how to do a bunch of this stuff. And when you learn the rules for a language like this, it can be exhausting. It can be disorienting. It could be frustrating. For sometimes when we've got people who can already speak, they're like, why are you taking it apart? Why are you doing that? And so one of the reasons is you can only memorize so much stuff. You cannot memorize a language. You just can't. You can memorize a jargon. You might be able to memorize some lines of Elvish or Klingon, but if you really want to speak that thing, you got to learn the structure of it. And so what we're going to do is start unlocking that structure. And so as a learner, there's a bunch of stuff you've got to do on your own, which is surrounding yourself with whole language, continuing to build your lists of things. What's this called? What's that called? What's the verb for this? What's the verb for that? And then you got to speak it. You got to find ways to speak it, or else, you know, a lot of people who study Tlingit, their understanding starts to take off, but their speaking goes really slow. So the thing I think you really have to overcome is sometimes there's a fear or a nervousness of getting it wrong or sounding silly. But you just got to know, it wasn't that long ago. Somebody said in public, we were teasing each other. It hurt my feelings, but I thought it was funny too. They said, we really like the way he works in the language, because he just gets up there and tries it. And nobody can understand what he's saying, but he sure does try. Anyway, we were all laughing, you know, and there was truth to it. But I was determined to learn. And I said, I don't care if I sound dumb. You know, it's not really dumb. I don't care if people can't understand me or if it sounds wrong. Because the more you try it, this is how your brain starts to figure out all those areas. Like it'll happen where you'll be like, oh wait, there was something was wrong with that. And then you'll be able to figure out what was wrong with it. So that is one of the reasons we pulled apart. So I like to show you all the things that go on inside. Whole bunch of stuff, but there's only so much stuff. Okay, let's take a look at maybe one more and then we'll probably have to call it for tonight. So eating it. So there has to be an it there. There's some fish, There's some Chinese food, whatever it is you're eating. Cracker. So these are all third person. So the singular they are doing it. Nobody was making it rain, right? No matter what the songs or the sayings are. Okay. Acha. Acha. Kesh ucha. Kesh ucha. Awacha. Awacha. Kesh awacha. Kesh awacha. Akwacha. Akwacha. Kesh akwacha. Kesh akwacha. So we see some of the things that we see that are changing there. Cha, 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 cha. That verb, so this is what we call the stem. There's some terms that we use to talk about a verb. The root would be cha, and it means eat. When we say root, we're looking at the meaning of that verb root. When we say stem, we're talking about the vowel. It's going to be short and high, long and high, or long and low. It'll be one of those three things. It will change in predictable ways, but there's quite a few factors involved. So when you look at a verb, there's going to be about 4 or 5 things that you have to internalize to know how to use that verb. Okay, so just get yourself ready. And so the way this stuff usually works is a whole bunch of kind of abstract concepts with some examples. But then we'll start doing some stuff and it'll start to click, because we'll just start running through, because then once you see it, it's sort of like, here's the concrete part with the abstract. So it's like you can't just sit there and listen to someone tell you how to hit a baseball. At some point, you just got to go out and start hitting a baseball, right? But this is what we're going to do. And so this is going to be kind of a pattern of learning. But what I also want to do is have us think of ways we could talk when class starts. So I'm going to keep challenging you to, basically we've been doing like, go write some sentences, go put some together. And like, maybe we're at a point where we don't need a specific number. I'll just say, go put something together that you could share with us when class starts. And if you can think of a response to someone, that's the that's the gold star, is responding to somebody, which is hard, because then it's not like I use the books and I use the database and I put this together. And so like you hear something and now you got to think of what to say about that thing. That's where we want to be. Communication, that's the whole goal. Okay, we're out of time. Xíxchʼ. Unless anybody's got any last questions. Looks like there's a couple things on the chat. I accidentally closed that. Oh yeah, so yeah, speaking too fast. There are speakers historically who speak really fast. And sometimes we set that as a goal to be able to just like, blah, 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 but other times we're also just nervous. And other times we're kind of, the brain, the wheels start turning. So if we can slow those functions down a little bit, I think it does help. And to just sort of pace yourself, listen to the language, and just keep this in mind. It's like we're just waiting for the tide to go out. We don't have to hurry. Tide's going out. We got 12 hours, right? We don't really, but maybe someday there'll be 12-hour language classes. And then there was a question to translate achowe. Achowe is because of this. Achaya is achowe is because of that. Achaya is because of this. So a lot of times we'll say, this happened with the frogs, and she explained this. Achowe wututsaku. This is why we know it, right? Or this is why it's this thing. Uch aya what's the thing? Like they started that fire and it charred raven. That's why the raven's black today. Okay, gonna teach you, Han. Wukecha. Wuchekach tustin.
Ikwati gonna cheese.
Renee, can I ask you something? Chataya Juantlain, Kachchanak, Kodzati. I heard that on the Juno radio that at the top of the hour they're saying stuff like from the traditional lands of the Wushkitan. And the Wrangell radio was asking me if I could put something together, and I was thinking of saying you are listening to KSDK, Stikine River Radio, the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi, the ancestral home of the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. And I was wondering if that would be all enough, or would I have to name the clans? Because as you were doing your story on the frog, I thought that there was some beautiful language there about the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. And I know that there's 10 clans here, and and they want young kids to do it, and I kind of hesitate to do some stuff in Tlingit because when they're talking, they usually start laughing, or they can't do it, or they don't do it seriously.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, you know, as soon as I start to talk in public, my brain goes murky. But I would say you are on the ancestral belonging to the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. And it is, you know, those 10 clans, the Nanya'ai, the Siknachadi, the Kayash, Kadatan, the Hukede, the Xíxchʼ, and those two last ones are gone. And the Tafquedi, the Kiksadi, the Kachadi, the Tiatan, and the Kaskaquedi. And the Kaskaquedi was Kadashan.
Oh, wow.
And their Thunderbird house, and it had to do with Haida or something like that. But I don't know that I should name all of the clans, or if I was just going to ask what you thought would be a succinct way of saying you're on the ancestral home of the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi.
Yeah, I guess I would suggest possibly making 2 versions. And so maybe there's a version, and they're almost exactly the same, but one lists those 10 clans. So it's like, maybe every now and then throw this one out there too, because it might be nice for people to hear that. Because even a lot of our young people too, they're like, I'm a frog? And like, that's all they know, right? And so just to put the names of those clans out there. And when I do assessments of language learners, for those of you who are going to do assessments at some point, you might hear a question like says, name 5 raven clans, 5 eagle clans. And there's a lot of people who've been studying Clinket for a long time and can't name 10 clans, right? Like total. And so I think it's good to have those names out there. Xíxchʼ, I've heard Xíxchʼ, and I've also heard Xíxchʼ. And so like you could say the name of the radio station, I forget what the letters are, but you say the radio like KTOO, Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi on the land of the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. So you could use that. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is a really neat term. So we used Ku'u. We saw that one earlier today. And Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi is the first people. So that's how you say like indigenous peoples. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. So yeah, you could have something like the abbreviations, whatever they are. KTOO. That's just the one in Juno. Yisa'ach Yidet. So you're listening to this right now. Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi on the land of the Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi. Then you could have another one where you could say Ye'awah Yochayati Hanach Sati'a. These are the ones that are here. Our clans, Hanach Sati'a. And then you name them.
Okay.
probably alphabetical. I don't know. It's, you know, the fights are always ready to start. Like, how come you didn't name us first? Yeah, but
yeah. Oh, they're in a row. You know, we were camped on the upper river and then down the outer sand people.
Oh,
you know, they came down, they were up there, and then they came here and they went there, blah, 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 all the way down to the redwood forest.
There are some communities, like they would know, like whose goes on the top of that pole, who's on the bottom, and what it means. And so
continuous kick up dust there.
But it's always just better to do it than to not do it, I think, because there's always these reasons why people don't. But then it's just like, well, then it's all English all the time. So
yeah, well, goodness, sheesh, I told them that, and then I didn't say anything about having the kids do it. I'll do that, and then they can do it in English, I suppose. There's 2 young people that are going to go over there and record at the top of the hour, giving just saying whose land we're on.
yeah, and then they could also have shorter phrases that they just mix in there, right? Like you could say, "Xíxchʼ Aawasháayi." Thanks for listening.
That sounds really good. I never really put my name. I speak on the radio, but I don't really say anything in Clinket unless it's accidentally. Yeah, when I'm talking or doing a community calendar. So, okay, gonna cheese.
Okay.
I'm just satelliting your intermediate Clinket. It's really, it's safe.
Sheesh, okay.
Cheesh.